Good evening. This is People to Be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. I'm John Bailey, and tonight you've got Nadine Hunt Robinson, councilman for the city of White Plains, in White Plains, New York, USA. And she is here today because this is about a week we're taping after the Dr. Martin Luther King breakfast and his birthday. And we thought, what better person to discuss the new new nuances of civil rights today. It has changed a lot, hasn't it? But anyway, Ms. Hunt Robinson is an immigrant. She immigrated to the United States from Jamaica with her parents in 1971. She attended New York City public schools. Thereafter, she received her BA from Adelphi University and a JD from Villanova University School of Law. While attending Villanova University, she was articles editor for the Environmental Law Journal. She is an attorney in private practice, and she was the first African-American woman to be elected to the White Plains City Council. And she successfully lobbied to ban the box on city employment applications, spearheaded law changes to protect senior citizens, and championed enhanced anti-bias and diversity training for the local police force. And that is a great bio. Thank you for supplying that. That was really great.
I'm honored to be here.
Yes. Now, the situation is, could you describe your childhood, how you grew up?
Sure.
Right, and how you were affected.
So, as you noted, I immigrated here when I was 3 years old with my parents. And it's interesting, my mom, when I saw the movie The Help, that's partly my story. My mom came as the help. She was sponsored. She came first. She worked 24/7, one day off, so that her husband and child, we came thereafter. So my dad and I came thereafter. We lived in the Bronx. We started in the Bronx, as many. We spent some time in public housing. My work ethic comes from my parents. At any given time, there were 3 jobs amongst my 2 parents. Sometimes my mother took on extra private duty as a nurse's aide on the weekend. Sometimes my dad, he was a store clerk. He also drove a cab at night. So that is the drive that immigrants have. Part of the reason we immigrated is many Jamaicans and West Indians immigrate to either the United States, Canada, or England, is because when we got independence, when Jamaica got independence, there was no redistribution of land. There was no redistribution of wealth. Most of the land was already carved up by the colonialist occupiers. So if you wanted to come out of whatever class you were born into, you wanted to own property, you wanted to own land, it was you look to the horizons and to America. So we came with that constant drive. We were always saving for a house. You always heard that, growing up in my household. Education was key. My grandmother, we didn't have the extended family here, obviously, so we corresponded through, communicated through letters, old-fashioned writing of letters, and I think that has benefited me in my lifetime. And my grandmother, as did my parents, stressed education, and the goal is to own your home. And ultimately, my parents were successful, so I saw them do that. They bought a home in Mount Vernon. So my family is split between Mount Vernon because my extended family did come. My mom sponsored them, so they did come to the U.S. So many are in Mount Vernon and other states. We've moved on, and I live in White Plains.
I see. Is your family now affected by the new efforts to restrict immigration at all? Just
fortunately for us, I was naturalized as a child. As immigrants, we were very proud in being in America, and because our mom was sponsored, she got citizenship, and she made sure I got my citizenship as a child. I've encouraged all of my family members to get their citizenship. Some have. We have some that are working in the military, some that have been in Afghanistan. So they're committed. I stress the import of citizenship. I remember when I went to school, you mentioned I went to Adelphi, and I lived near the international dorm. And so I had a lot of friends who were in the international dorm, and I always remember my friend, God rest his soul, Jose. And Jose was from Panama. And Jose was like, well, I'm still a citizen of Panama. He was very proud of that. And I remember thinking, well, Jose, when's the last time you've been to in living in Panama? Could you live there? Because his whole extended family was here. Why don't you get your American citizenship? And you've seen it play out. Some have no choice, but there are some who haven't gotten American citizenship. I wouldn't take any chances, because if you're wrongly accused and wrongly put in jail, and it could happen, particularly as a person of African descent in this country, right? And you serve your time, and then you're deported to a country that you haven't lived in. You've lived up here. You've become Americanized. That can be shocking. And I used to always say that to Jose. Jose, God rest his soul, he died a Panamanian. But it is something with my family members, I emphasize, as my mother did, get your citizenship. As I said, she got it early, and she naturalized me.
Do you feel it's become harder to get citizenship today coming in? With the way that the new rules that the administration
It's always been hard. You have to appreciate, my mother filing for an extended family, it took about 7 to 10 years in going through the process.
Was there a lot of fees?
It's fees, it's paperwork, it's harder than what a mortgage used to be. See, now everything's online. Remember how they lose your paperwork? And I filed all those forms and file them again. And it could be difficult because...
And you could lose them.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And back then, it's like you're going to Spanish Town. You might not be going to Kingston, which is the capital. You may be going out of your way to Spanish Town. You may not have a car. I mean, there were so many issues in getting there when paperwork is lost. So it was always a bureaucratic process. It was never streamlined. It also took financing. Once my mother came, she saved, and it was always, I understood the values of doing for others. You put the money in the bank so you can sponsor other people, right? So that's part of it.
That's striking. Yeah. That is absolutely striking. Could you describe your childhood? Were you subject to the anti-immigrant attitudes then as we are today?
Definitely. I think society has changed a lot. A prime example, when we were in Mount Vernon, there was a time I went away to grad school in Pennsylvania. And I stayed in Pennsylvania, I practiced in Pennsylvania after school. And it was just interesting just seeing the shift where I used to be one of few West Indians, and to coming back to Mount Vernon. I think I was in the Pathmark at the time, and I said, wow, this has become like little Jamaica. Like, I hear so many accents around me. And growing up when there wasn't, people just, there wasn't a lot of representation of the diversity even on TV growing up. So people were always sometimes at a pause, like, your mother speaks funny. You know, your parents speak funny. Where are they from? And you get used to that. Diversity. I was raised in that diversity, so it was no big deal to me. But I saw that it was sometimes some were taken aback. Sometimes, as you said to me earlier, you didn't know that I was an immigrant. I've been in the rooms when people have ridiculed immigrants, black and white, being West Indians, and it depends. Do I feel like going on the soapbox at this particular time? But there are times. I was in a good friend's wedding, and they were discussing the state of America, Black America today, and the comment was she felt that, what is it about, Jamaicans are able to get these mortgages and get these houses, and I've lived here all my life and I'm unable to. And I was in the wedding, and this was a woman I had spent hours with, and we had bonded 5 generations of women. And I said, oh, she doesn't know I'm Jamaican. And my good friend knew. And what I did was I communicated with her, and I talked about what I discussed with you, that hunger for land, that we couldn't buy the land in Jamaica. So yes, we come here, and it's a grind to want to own your own home. Like, that's the goal. And then she understood I was not the enemy. I understood the historic redlining in America. I understood that the government was a part of the redlining that impacted the ability of African Americans to purchase houses. But as a West Indian who did come over, and my parents were able to purchase, and we're not the enemy. And how can we work together to deal with the vestiges of that redlining that exists today, that precluded people of African descent from owning in certain
Yes.
neighborhoods.
See, that line, we are not the enemy, is so true, because of the discourse on the airwaves and in the papers and the statements by our senators and congressmen and women who should know better
Absolutely.
are talking about that.
And that's not new. I mean,
Yeah.
that when your question again was was I affected by segregation? Even coming up and going to in college and in grad school, and I remember it particularly in grad school, the divisiveness was cultivated politically then. I wasn't as aware of politics as I was just trying to get in law school, survive law school, get a job, pay off $100,000 in debt, just figuring a way. But that divisiveness was being promoted even then. It was a dog whistle then, certain terms. I remember a commercial that said a man crumbling up a rejection letter. It was a hand. And you can tell that it was the hands of a Caucasian male from the color. Did you not get that opportunity? It's because of affirmative action. And I had a roommate that was hostile, absolutely hostile, because she felt that there was a friend who had a higher GPA and she should be here instead of you. And I had to walk her through, because she had a B+ average. And I had to walk her through, oh, so let me get this right. You're from where? Danbury, Connecticut. I love you. You had a car while undergrad? Yeah, wow, you didn't have to walk anywhere. Did you have a job? No, I didn't have to work. Oh, so you had room and board taken care of. So you didn't have to decide what books you could buy versus paying rent. And I said to her, after going through, including having an attorney in the family and knowing how to navigate, I'm surprised you didn't have higher than a B+. And it was just a reality check. But people have been stoking the fires of divisiveness. It's not new. It's just no longer being done with the dog whistle, in my opinion. Now it's just blunt, but unfortunately there is a segment of society where it was always there. And we never truly got past that. We issued the court opinions. It was great, 1954 Brown versus Board of Education. We had the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But you can't legislate hearts. So it was still there.
You can't legislate heart. Remember that. You have to come from the heart and treat people as you would like to be treated. If we all did that, we'd be a lot more.
Well, that's where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of the Martin Luther King breakfast just passed? I mean, I've never heard representatives be that candid, forthright, and downright militant as I heard that day.
Militant.
Well, militant is perhaps the right word.
Yeah, because I would say,
perhaps,
because it's needed. I think they're being direct and forthright. I think those statements were on point because it's in the hostility is so in your face. The divisiveness is so in your face. It's vulgar. It has become vulgar. And so you can't be timid. And sometimes you have to have directness in your communication on the issue.
Anita Lowy, one of the most bipartisan, we can work this out people, said the president was embarrassing. And that is, I've never heard that in discourse. And credit her for saying that.
Well, and it was necessary because one of the things that King said, as we're focused on today, is that you don't remember the words of your enemies as much as the silence of your friends. And I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me if I mutilated that. But it is the silence of your friends. If you're truly a friend, black, white, as my mother would say, black, white, or polka dot, you speak up. Because at the end, it degrades us all. It affects, and I think we're at the stage in this country that we're really fighting again for the soul of the country. That's what is at stake, the very soul of our country.
Yes, when the immigration policy was announced, I was so upset about it that I said we should give the Statue of Liberty back to France because it doesn't mean anything more. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel the black youth of today revered Dr. King, or are they ambivalent?
I think
You're the head of the Youth Bureau, by the way.
I think it depends on their parents and the schools, whether black youth or white youth, because it's really important that he be taught and revered in the import of the context of Dr. Martin Luther King and why he's important. It's important for all youth. I think those parents who are engaged, I'm in a lot of organizations, historical black sororities, fraternities, other organizations, youth bureau, the church. I find that parents who are engaged tend to have children who are engaged and who are aware. And parents who, for whatever reason, sometimes you can easily get focused on just work. I think one of the biggest changes is that my parents had to do, as I said at different times, 2 jobs. It was to get ahead. Now it's become 2 jobs just to survive, just to pay the rent, not to get ahead. So for some reason, that's sometimes the reason why people are not engaged, because it's literally just working to keep the roof over the head, to keep food in the mouth, and they're not being involved. And I remember you noted that I was on the Environmental Law Journal, and the reason why I entered the competition for that journal is I was at a seminar at Villanova, and the seminar had to do with discrimination on an area called Chester. Chester was a predominantly African-American community in Pennsylvania. And they had already had 4 or 5 disposal sites already in this very small town of Chester. And they were proposing an incinerator just to add to the problem. And they had another incinerator. So this could be catastrophic. And a student raised their hand and asked the instructor, who was a practicing lawyer in the environmental area, well, why don't we see enough African Americans standing up on these environmental regulations and coming to the hearings? And, they seem indifferent. They don't seem engaged. And the man said, and it's something I could relate to because, again, I spent some time living in the housing project, so I can see it. It's not anecdotal for me. He goes, when you're thinking about the basics, food, shelter, clothing, it's harder to think about the environment, right? And to sit back and to think about these other
concerned
issues.
About yourself. I think that's the problem with the generation of 20s and 30s. They are so hard-working and trying to make ends meet that they cannot focus on what's really happening.
Absolutely. And so, therefore, for those of us who are able to, and part of my reason in joining the council the time that I did, to whom much is given, much is required. So I am able to, and so therefore, and I'm able to, and I have benefited from those before me, and so that is my mantra, to help as many that I can for as long as I can.
Yeah. Now, do you feel Dr. King's boycott strategy, which was a brilliant move to progress civil rights, can be as effective today?
Absolutely. And I've seen it play out several times. There was a young lady from White Plains, and she had been discriminated against on her job, and immediately, and the company was Banana Republic, and I was one who also called, because you can use social media to quickly, you don't have to wait for the news to decide to publish your story, right? No. The beauty of social media is how quickly you can get it out locally, nationally, internationally. And being in so many networks, that was used effectively. The Banana Republic did apologize. They dealt with the manager quickly, but quite frankly, part of the issue was we were going to boycott the brand. And that's important. I think, however, with marches and boycotts, it's very important to have very concrete goals. For instance, the 1964 Civil Rights Act didn't come about in 1964. We attempted through several presidential administrations to get that passed, right? But you continue to put that pressure on, and what's really important is to stay engaged and don't give up. Even in the situation where we're in now, with this hostility, don't give up. Stay engaged, because our ancestors did not give up, and we went through several administrations. And there's a point in time, sometimes there will be a time when the stars will align, and then you put the pressure of the 1963 March on Washington, and you continue to put that pressure on via boycotts and marches, but the legislation was already drafted. We knew what we wanted. And so you have to have a confluence of such strategies, different strategies. There'll be agitators, there'll be scriveners, there'll be writers in the papers, and individuals like yourselves, various journalists, whether it's the hardline journalists on TV or your community journalists. They're all important. We all play a part in moving the needle.
All right. Now, it seems to me, that's just my perception, that we lack that big-time Dr. King personality and leadership in the minorities of every minority. Now, who do you feel is going to emerge? Are there? Could you name a few? Because I haven't heard a lot from them.
I thought about that, and I guess my pause with that question, you have to, not everyone in the viewing audience appreciates that Martin Luther King Jr. was not hailed a leader per se at the time he was going through it. Leaders are not coronated, as I would say. Rather, they naturally arise because of their authenticity, their courage, that vision. People can tell, and sometimes authenticity, for some, it takes a while to figure it out. We've seen that on this national stage. Some may see it quicker than others. But you have to have that authenticity, you have to have that courage, you have to have that vision. But as they're rising, sometimes people don't even realize that they're rising. You mentioned the breakfast, and one of the things, the Martin Luther King breakfast this week, one of the things that I noted with that young man that I was proud to see, he was the keynote speaker, is that he realized that he was a leader. And that is something, as I'm working with the
I have
youth,
to do this.
Stop waiting for someone else. Stop waiting for that leader to be coronated. Stop waiting for someone to say, follow this one, or who's going to do something about this. Because again, that was something that I had to come to the realization of. I had to move from being an armchair philosopher, because I told you at one point I used to watch 4 cable news networks, and I had my own opinions on everything, and to trust that opinion and get out there where policy is being decided. So I would encourage people, but there are many in different realms, and I think the other thing is not focusing on the leaders of the Black community. There are people now in Congress, men and women who are Black, and they're not just leaders of the Black community. Quite frankly, getting back to what I said, we're fighting for the soul of America. They're leaders. And the issues that affect the Black community, quite frankly, we have always been the canary in the coal mine. So if in that, sometimes you may see an issue that's impacting us more. Let's take drugs in the 70s and 80s. You ignore it with us. It's just a matter of time before it's impacting all of America.
The opioid crisis really affecting a tremendous amount of young people and from all races and creeds.
Exactly. So therefore, they're leaders. They're Black, but they're more than just leaders of the Black community, because the issues that impact, and particularly because they impact everyone. You mentioned the fact that I'm an immigrant. Yes, and as an immigrant, I am sensitive to the issues, whether or not they're Jamaican, whether they're Mexican, whether they're Muslim, because I know what it is to be discriminated against. And talked about people who mean well by you. They like you, but they just had this view, a hostile view of Jamaicans that was broad brush, right? But then they made me like, oh, okay, well, you are. But it makes me stand up for immigrants broadly, because I may be sensitive to the issues, but I would never put the Black leaders of today in a box of being leaders of Black people. They're very
Yes.
broad.
That is a mistake on my part. Like that's like expecting there to be more voices on the Latino population and those type of. But again, I'm not hearing enough
Right.
from the sides that are so profoundly affected.
It depends on where you go.
I said,
It depends on where you go. I mean, because one of the things that I talked about in the Common Council when I first came in, and some of the questions of people who had been engaged in politics. Well, I didn't think you were involved, and I said I was very involved in White Plains. Maybe you're not in the places that I am.
How
See,
true.
because I'm in Bethel Baptist Church in the basement, and I'm working with these emerging young leaders there. I'm at Calvary and dealing with the environmental issues because that was one of the platforms of my sorority. And yes, it's a graduate chapter, so I get the Environmental Protection Agency to send someone out to talk about asthma because it's not just the asthma and dealing with the medical condition that's disproportionately affects people of color. It's the days off of school that then affects them with respect to education, right? So it affects us disproportionately. So I'm toiling at Calvary, I'm toiling at Bethel. I'm walking down the street to the Family Services of Westchester because they have the Big Brother, Big Sister programs. So you may not see me, but it doesn't mean the organizations that you're in are more important than the organizations that I'm in. So I would say maybe you just don't see them because of where their focus is.
Very true, very true. And yes, we have about 30 seconds.
Okay.
And this is a big question answered in so little time. Where do you see this going locally in Westchester County?
Okay. Locally, as it is nationally, where we are at a crossroads and we are fighting for the soul of our country. And I think it's important that conversations be had. You talked about the forthrightness of leaders such as myself. I will have those conversations, not just in our own communities. We have to cross cultural boundaries and divides and have those conversations at lunch, at the dinner tables, with our own family members. Those who know better should be willing to check the others. There's a process of continuous improvement. One of the reasons in moving to White Plains, I really respected White Plains for their controlled choice programs with the integration of the schools, that it's not just solely neighborhood schools, because there has been historical segregation. And people from other districts come and they look at how are you doing this in White Plains and how is it being effective. There were law review articles.
That's why we came to live in White Plains.
Okay,
Right.
so you too.
Yeah.
So, but I say that to say it's a process of continuous improvement.
Right.
We never sit on our laurels. That's why I said enhanced police diversity. That was one of the things that came through the box, because coming up through corporate America, when I came in, I said, okay, I know we have diversity training, but we always have to improve, enhance it.
Nadine Hunt Robinson, Councilman, City of White Plains,
Yes.
on Martin Luther King Week. You have been heard. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
John Bailey for People to Be Heard.